Something happened in this cold, barren spot almost 150 years ago that would change the course of human history. A new game would arise that would spread around the world, inflaming passions, changing health, and helping create the massive new phenomenon of sport. Every year, the city of Kingston celebrates the birth of hockey here. But did it really start here? That question has not been settled. But the dream that hockey started here is very much alive. I have had the luck and privilege of living and working in some amazing cities. But one day, I ended up here. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. But life is full of surprises. And as I watched the city of Kingston renew and transform itself, I would be renewed and transformed in ways I never imagined. This is that story. It was actually right here that the sport of hockey was first formalized. Although hockey has its origins in many places, including Montreal and Windsor, Nova Scotia, and indigenous communities across the country, now here in this Gulf, it was more or less right here that the formal game of hockey was developed. Right in this Gulf, which is now broken up by the passage of ferries. In 1886, two rival institutions, the Royal Military College and Queen's University, would confront each other on this ice, batting a square puck back and forth with an improvised set of rules that would later be formalized in something called hockey. These rival institutions would settle their scores on the ice, one of the more enlightened principles of sport. From here, hockey spread across the land like wildfire, and within years became one of North America's and definitely Canada's premier sport. And that tradition has actually never ended. There's a Queen's RMC rival game to commemorate the original game every year. In fact, the city does it twice. A stone's throw from where hockey was invented, next to City Hall, there's a traditional hockey game played with the traditional equipment, square pucks, short sticks, different pads. This fast-moving game is intended to match and imitate the original first game, except it is no longer restricted to just men.
So the origin of this sport, there were a lot of stick and ball hockey games that were played in Europe, right? Stick and ball, not necessarily hockey. Field hockey, hurley, which is an Irish game. So those are really the roots of the game. So some people believe the real fundamentals of what became hockey started in Europe.
In 1843, there was a British soldier named Arthur Freeling that was stationed in Kingston, and he had written in his diary, the boys were playing hockey out on the harbour. And that's the first known reference to the word hockey that anyone had ever seen.
But no direct correlation. As I said, I mean, the direct correlation to hockey would be more of those stick and ball games that were played in Europe, as I mentioned earlier, games like hurley, for example. There's never going to be a definitive answer of where the first game was played, right? Because the game developed and had different origins. We always believe that Windsor's story was not as strong as Montreal's or Halifax's or Kingston's, for that matter, just because of the fact, I mean, there was a pond there. The actual A lot of their story actually came from a book of fiction that was written. There was a book of fiction written decades later that referenced a certain year and said that games were played in Windsor, Nova Scotia on a certain pond at that point in time, right? So, I mean, really what this is about here is to celebrate the origins of the sport, right?
Is called the Historic Hockey Series. It originated in 1969 with a local festival called Winterfest, and it has maintained right up to current day.
The square puck was actually cut from a lacrosse ball, right? So they actually took a lacrosse ball, they cut it down into a square hockey puck. And as you can imagine, the rubber that's used in a lacrosse ball is very, very hard rubber. The pucks that we're using today are a sponge puck.
Yeah, if you look around here, it's pretty clear that hockey started around here. So I'm born and raised in Kingston, so that's just what my roots tell me.
We've done it continuously since 1969. So it began as a Kingston Winter Carnival in 1969, and here we are still going in 2023. And outside of COVID, we've played it every single year.
We have university level hockey, we have OHL, and then lots of AAA all the way through minor hockey on both the male and female side. So always hockey going on here at any given day, any time at one of the rinks in town.
But the city also replays the original hockey game in the form of the Cart Harris Challenge Cup, which takes place every year. This game pits the two rival teams against each other. But what makes this game different is the cheering and the support for each team.
The RMC Queens rivalry for hockey dates right back to the beginning of hockey. I mean, the two schools playing out on the lake. It's the longest running hockey rivalry in the world. Car Harris Cup, it's a great event here in the city. I mean, it commemoration for the first ever game between RMC and Queens in 1886 out on Lake Ontario. This year we're playing our 35th edition of the Car Harris Cup, which was made in memory of the Car Harris family, which both had long ties of history at RMC and Queens, both on the athletic side, student side, teaching side. So it's a game and a tradition that the two schools take very seriously, and we're all very honored to be part of something so historic here in the city of Kingston.
Queens and RMC is the oldest rivalry in hockey, right? There's no older rivalry. Montreal-Toronto is not older than Queens and RMC. They played continuously since 1886. They played before that in more informal games of shinny, but that's obviously a very big part of it. And the other key fact I would say about this today is that there's no other major sport, any other sport, that does a reenactment game other than us. So there's only one sport, hockey, which does a reenactment game, and there's only one place it's played, which is in Kingston, Ontario.
You know, annually it's one of our big games that we still play every year with the Car Harris Cup. We play in front of 5,000 people, and it's a date that everyone in the hockey community in the area circles. To just be part of that history and to see some of the traditions that still carry on with the town crier introducing the game. It's a real community event, and it, like I said, it goes back to the outdoor days on Lake Ontario, where both schools were involved annually playing a game out there.
Kingston is a deeply hockey-loving town, and one of its peculiar features is that it has its own Hockey Hall of Fame.
One of the key figures in the early part of the game was James Sutherland. So James Sutherland was not only a viewer at the 1886 game, but he was one of the early developers in the sport, both in Kingston, in Ontario, and in Canada. And subsequently, later on in the 20th century, in 1943, James Sutherland created the Hockey Hall of Fame. He had approached the National Hockey League and stressed that Kingston was one of the birthplaces of the game, and they felt that that was true as well, and they decided to establish the first Hockey Hall of Fame here in Kingston in 1943.
Their financing was very limited in terms of the funds that they provided. There was a fundraising program that happened during the war years, Second World War. Long story short, after 15 years, they were inducting players and builders, but we didn't have a physical building. So in 1958, the National Hockey League reversed the decision, decided to move the Hockey Hall of Fame to Toronto, but the Hall of Fame here continued, and we actually had a building starting in 1965. We've never inducted any new members, but the first 42 members inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame were inducted during the Kingston era.
By the time the building was in the works to be built here in Kingston, there was a move to move the Hockey Hall of Fame to Toronto. The group here in Kingston still continued with their vision, and they built the original Hockey Hall of Fame, originally known as the International Hockey Hall of Fame. In 1965, the building was built on the Memorial Center grounds, and from there, it's just evolved over the last 75 plus years. We have a jersey from 1894. It's a Queen's jersey, the tricolored jersey. Again, likely one of the oldest jerseys in existence. So in 1917, the First World War was going on. James Sutherland was actually an active soldier and was named captain. So he's often referred to as Captain James Sutherland. When he came back from the war, he wanted to memorialize the soldiers that had died in World War I with a trophy related to hockey. So that's where the Memorial Cup came from in 1919. He created that here in Kingston, and it's a great Kingston story to tell as well. Again, it's made over 100 years. It's been awarded for over 100 years now, which is great milestone. And it's something that we have now developed a complete display here in the Hall of Fame to show the Memorial Cup story and a lot of Memorial Cup artifacts as well. I mean, the city of Kingston has produced a number of great hockey players, a number of great hockey teams, but to the current day, the city has always been a partner with the Hockey Hall of Fame. Even in the early days, in 1943, the city was attempting to work with the Hall of Fame board to create a building. And then in current day, the city still helps us out in a great number of ways. We're in a city facility here where there's thousands of hockey fans that come through every year, and they've allowed us this room to allow hockey fans to come into and see a lot of great artifacts from hockey history.
The hockey culture in Kingston is different. I learned that the hard way. When I arrived here, I joined a local street hockey league. I thought I was pretty good, having played street hockey in Toronto and Montreal, but I would go on to lose almost every game. My personal experience of the passionate Kingston hockey culture.
Even someone like Don Cherry was a renowned announcer for a number of years and very well known Canadian for sure. Kirk Muller, Doug Gilmore. There's a lot of players from Kingston that have gone on to great success. And again, there's another interesting Kingston story in that there's 5 Kingston players that have scored Stanley Cup winning goals, which to our research, we have not found another city that had 5 players that have done that. And Kingston can brag about that. So from the 1930s through the late 1990s, there was 5 players that accomplished that feat.
The NHL put the Hall of Fame here in 1943 because they felt Kingston was the birthplace of hockey, right? So that's another part of the Kingston hockey story. They didn't say it was Windsor, Nova Scotia. They didn't say it was Montreal or Halifax, right? They said it was Kingston. The Society for International Hockey Research says that the first organized game was played in Montreal in 1875. The first organized game in Kingston was 1886, so roughly about a decade later. Queens and RMC played the first organized game here on the Kingston Harbour. It really depends on your definition of what organized really truly means. The situation was in Montreal where they had game officials, they had scorekeepers, they had official reporting on the game, that type of thing. So the game in Kingston was a bit more informal, but in our view, was the first organized hockey game.
While we may never settle the question of the exact place where hockey was first invented, there is one question around which there is no doubt. There is no city that is more passionate, more driven, and more inspired about the origins of hockey than Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And it celebrates it every year.